It's no secret we're in a tough agricultural economy, and we might be here for a while. So, I decided to do in this episode of the Granary, bring in some buddies from XtremeAg and Galynn Beer from AgroLiquid, who obviously have been through a couple of tough times in agriculture and cycles. And I want to talk to you now about the agricultural economy and how to best navigate it. Tips you can use in your farming operation in this episode of the Granary. You ready for a conversation with some real farmers about real issues? And the best part, you're invited. So pour yourself a drink. Grab a snack. Most importantly, pull up a chair. Welcome to the Granary. Hey, guys. All right, guys, I just got the topic, and for anybody watching this, that's Kevin Matthews, and one of the founders of XtremeAg, joined by Matt Miles, one of the founders of XtremeAg, and our buddy Galynn Beer here with AgroLiquid. AgroLiquid is sponsoring this episode of the Granary. They have sponsored a number of episodes of the Granary. We're very happy to have you on here, and it's not just that you're a corporate guy, you also farm in Oklahoma in some very tough conditions. You not only have tough conditions, you got a tough economy, and you also have been through a couple of storms because of your age, as have Matt and Kevin and even me. It's not as bad as the 80s. That's what I've been telling everybody. It's not as bad as the 80s. That's usually like saying it could have been worse. You could have gotten a broken neck. I mean, it's kind of tough. So what are you telling people right now?
Well, I mean, the one thing that I'm just making sure guys are doing is, putting a pen to the paper. A lot of farmers, if you ask them what their break even is, they don't know. And it's not uncommon in this type of economy. I've heard guys go, nothing pencils, I'm not planting anything. And they forget about all those looming fixed costs that are out there. And so I think that, more than anything is guys need to really work through a process. How much is my actual herbicide program? What do I spend on fertilizer? And make sure that they're evaluating all of those things for the year, because it is tight enough. It's not the type of year you want to go wing it.
I find it interesting that it's been more than 30 years, that maybe even going back to Purdue, when I had someone talk about in an economics class, you really need to understand your cost of production. How is it that 30 to 40 years later, we still have people out here running around that don't know? I get it if there's an emergency that comes up. Do you know your cost of production? Surely to goodness.
Absolutely.
Down to the nickel?
Pretty much penny. Pretty much penny. Which, one of my goals early on was I always wanted to have a CPA in-house. And so I accomplished that several years ago, started out with a CFO that was a CPA. And then I found out at his recommendation, I really needed a controller more so than a chief financial officer. And the controller does exactly as it says. She's a CPA, but she keeps everything in control. The inventory is big. Good example. Just in our filters alone, what do you think it costs just to service our equipment for 1 year? Just filters. No oil. Yeah. No oil now. Yeah. Just the filters.
I thought you were asking the questions, Damian.
But it's $29,000.
And by the way, there's a lot of people that
when you look at this,
they wouldn't build that into the cost of production.
They wouldn't even know.
No,
they wouldn't even know.
That's just incidental.
Yeah, but when you look at the shelf in our shop, and you're like, wow, there's $29,000 sitting there on 4 shelves. Yeah. 4 sections of shelves. That's quite a bit. But just to service the combine with the oil and filters, no labor, $1,722. You need to know these things. And, by knowing them, I'm like anyone else. I've got bills I owe. I make payments, have to borrow money. That's the way it goes. And my goal is to pay no interest. I had a loan officer that still works with me to this day. And the first time we met in our conference room, he says, I want to work with y'all, but said, I got one goal for you. He said, I want you to pay no interest. And think about that. Interest is a big deal, especially you talked about the 80s. I remember Dad and them sitting there facing 18 to 20% interest rates.
So cost of production doesn't just mean, okay, I spent this much on seed. And that's where I think maybe there might be some people that make that fundamental error. Filters are part of cost of production, right?
Yeah, and that's what even a lot of farmers that you ask them, they know their cost of production, they'll tell you yes, but they may not be counting their cell phones, their truck insurance, their filter. I mean, when you go to looking at things, and I was 12 in 1980, okay, so I didn't experience that. I don't know that it was any worse because what you just said about the filters. Those sound filters in 1980 was probably a couple $200.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you're looking at 17,000 versus 200. You're looking at 6% interest. Now I'm not 100% at when interest was 2-3%, I wanted interest.
Oh, Lord.
I wanted, because, you could, instead of just paying your land off, you get twice as many acres at 3%. So there's times when interest is good. But what's happened to us in the last couple of years is an increase in cost, a downturn in the markets, and an increase in interest. So we got hit with three things at one time.
Yep.
So and one of the best things that's helped me with that is almost going out of farming. In 2000, I pretty much thought I was done. The bank told me I was done. I was able to go to FHA, and I think they had my clothes hangers on. I
know the feeling.
I put everything I had up my guns.
Yeah.
How much your house?
When your lawnmower's on your inventory balance sheet, it's
you're getting close. You're getting close to the end.
25 years ago, but that between that and working 2 years at a bank as an ag loan officer, those two things there, especially about to go out of business. Because I had to go face my wife and say, my dad just died, my dad just passed away, we had a hurricane, and I'm like, I got to go tell her that I'm not going to get a crop loan.
Yeah.
And so once you get, it's almost like a near-death experience. When you almost die, something like, say you have a heart attack, you quit smoking. Yeah. Or most people will.
Well, the good news today is cured you of worrying about anything, right?
I get that all the time about the very important.
You talked about interest, and you had a goal not paying interest. Matt's point is very valid, and I bring this up to agricultural people. You've got a lot of capital deployed in a generally low interest or a low margin environment. Interest rates went from, say, 3 to 6 or 4 to 8, and people say, "Oh, they went up 3%." No, they went up 100%. I try and point this out to people that are so financial. I'm like, if this cup went from $1 to $2, it went up $1, but it also went up 100%. And interest is an input. Interest is an agricultural input. And if it goes from 4 to 8%, it doubled it. And that's where a lot of people need to get their mind around.
Yeah. That cost is another one that guys almost don't track because, when my credit line comes due at the end of the year or it's built into different things they don't understand, hey, that's a significant cost. Sometimes it's a salary, a good salary.
A lot of times it can be $40, $50 an acre of your operation is your interest if you're not really following.
I think in this environment, I had someone tell me that and this is people that I know that are in ag lending and whatnot, they've got operators that are at $70 per acre.
Oh, there's no doubt.
Interest. Well, if you don't think $70 an acre is one of your cost of production, you're not thinking.
There's a lot of acres that aren't showing $70 an acre in profit. So if you don't have it in there, you're under.
Yeah, another thing we gotta remember is it amazes me every year. The news headlines is, fertilizer prices are up, fertilizer prices are down.
Why are you picking on us?
Well, hear me out. See, did you not tell just jumping the gun? You're jumping the gun.
We were sponsoring
you was fixing to get the ball.
All right.
Now, do you want to hear the rest of the story?
Let's hear the rest of the story, Kevin.
All right. So, 8430 John Deere tractor, bought brand new, $148,000. This ain't been that long ago. You think about it.
Oh, no.
All right. 8340, 8R340. You're talking $420,000 to $440,000, depending on how you spec that out. Basically the same functionality of the tractor, but we talk about the fertilizer prices going up, but we don't realize. Well, you don't hear us talking about the cost per acre. When I started farming, land acquisition, if you wanted to buy land, would by far was the most expensive per acre thing was to buy land. Yeah. Now it's equipment is our most expensive.
It's maybe not as much as land, but it's getting.
No, it's overland.
Is it?
Yeah, it's overland. You take a cost of a new combine, tractor, sprayer, anything. Hey, you don't have to have new. Whatever fits your size operation is what you need. But the fact is, we get so tunnel vision on the fertility cost, and we're going to cut that, but yet we're going to go buy a nicer tractor or a nicer combine, and that ain't going to make us the money that maybe that extra fertility does. Now, does that sound better, Galynn?
Yeah, that's a lot better.
You jumped the gun on me.
I don't need the brown paper bag to hyperventilate.
Right, so everybody gives you a hard time about the fertilizer. They don't really give you a hard time. It's just it's an input that we see. I think that looking at fertilizer or these inputs is like people becoming obsessed with gas prices. Did you see that down there at Kroger? It's $3.19, but at the Marathon, it's $3.09. Like, how many gallons of gas do you burn in a week? 20. Okay, so that's one tank. That's $2 on 10 cents, right? That's $2. You obsess over $2. That's $100 a year. $100 is significant. We like $100
You may
bills.
spend $4 going to the next.
That's what I'm saying, but for God's sakes, you're obsessing about $100 a year when you're dropping $1,000 over here. And that's how I look at sometimes these inputs. You're walking right past this machinery expense because farmers love machinery. You're going to go to the farm machinery show like you always do. Farmers love machinery. That's a hell of a lot bigger chance at upsetting the apple cart and getting over your skis and all those things than the fertilizer, I think.
And the problem is we try so hard to cut. We've talked about this on podcasts, and I just thought about this. I did that video on my regrowth corn. Yeah. And you said there's a lot of corn on the ground. I had a lot of corn on the ground, regrowth stalks, and I got to looking at that. I'm like, it's never like this. Well, guess what? I decided to save money on drying, let my corn dry in the field, not spend that money. What did it cost me in the field? Because it shattered worse. Probably would have at least paid for the drying, and I would have been out of the danger of any kind of hurricane. Fortunately, we didn't have it. But so many times we can't get out of the way of ourselves. I've seen that happen to me this year multiple times.
We're all guilty of that. That's easy. That's our easy button.
But if you do what Galynn says and you pay attention to every cost and what Kevin said, if you look at every cost, you'll know what we talked about on changing farm changes on one of these episodes. Once you change this, well, there's going to be an adverse reaction over here. Same thing with cutting costs. You just got to know which cost to cut. Or you're not, maybe you're even in the negative after you cut the cost. I was in that situation.
Sometimes it's a piece of ground we're farming we need to cut.
Yeah.
Right.
We need to just get rid of it.
But, as one of you guys has pointed out, that isn't always easy either. Because if a landlord has 10 good fields and one bad one, you can't tell him you don't want to farm the bad one. So that's kind of one of those things you get.
I'm going to rent it out. I'm going to rent the bad one out to
sublease it. Yeah.
Sublease it to chain.
That's right. But I think part of the fertilizer equation that people struggle with, it is a little bit more of a moving target. If you bought a tractor and you know what the payment is on that, when you walk out the door, that's defined. But then someone like me shows up and we start talking fertilizer and it becomes, okay, it's a moving target. And a lot of times farmers don't really have guardrails as to where should I be. And then you get in season and you get someone that goes and does a $50 foliar application because that is what you're supposed to do, right? But okay, you're not tracking that in the overall fertilizer budget. And you've heard me say, I always look at, let's just say that December corn was $5 because that's the only kind of math I can do. It's not that much. Let's be optimistic. And you're 200 bushels, that's $1,000. A good guardrail for starting fertilizer budget would be $200 an acre. And then you can either see whether you're a little bit better than that or you're a little bit more. And if it's corn, I always try to keep that nitrogen expense 55% or less of that fertilizer spend. Okay. Now you can start building backwards. And even if fertilizer is a little bit higher, when you start plugging in individual nutrients, you can start thinking, does this make sense for me?
So you're going with 10%. But I think that you like my comparison to gasoline prices that people just obsess over fertility, because it seems like it's the same thing. You're forgetting while that person that's obsessing over gas prices, forgetting that they also bought a Cadillac Escalade that their job should have had them in a Ford Pinto, and they got a 2025 Escalade, and it's like, yeah, you're obsessing over 10 cents on gas. Maybe you should have thought about that $90,000 car. Right. And that's where I think that, and I don't farm, so it's easy to say. We get enamored with equipment, and a lot of equipment is sitting there, and it don't make you any money when it's not running.
That's very true. It costs a lot of money when it's sitting there idling, too. We don't think about that idle time.
Yeah, travel time to fill up.
Yeah.
But that's one thing I like about y'all, AgroLiquids, is you're not out there just trying to sell the product. You yourself and your team are analyzing, and if you don't think it's a year when you'd have to have it, you're going to recommend not to use it. And I know that's sometimes counterproductive to sales, but it's not counterproductive to people coming back buying from you again.
The long-term sales. Well, we said we're going to give some tips and ideas on navigating this. We've kind of already heard them. You talked about inventory. There's a lot of larger scale farms have a lot of stuff sitting around, and they're going to say the same thing. But I need that. Do you really?
Yeah, but it's showing on the balance sheet. Does their lender, is it showing up in their debt to asset ratio for their lender to see that it's an asset to contribute to their business? That's the little things. How about your field work? Let's a lot of people think, well, until I've got it planted, I don't have no money out there. But yet they've spent $75, $80 an acre through the winter getting their fields ready for spring planting. Well, that needs to be on your monthly balance sheets. That need to be there. And folks, if you're doing balance sheets once a year, you need to be doing them monthly. You need to be changing and see where you are.
A lot of moving things.
You got to be. I want to be the guy that goes and tells my lender, hey, this is what you're fixing to see. I don't want my lender to call me and say, hey, do you realize you're here? Because I've been in that situation.
Instead of reactive.
Exactly.
Anything you do in there.
You've been an ag lender. Are filters an asset?
Are filters an asset?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you got them in your shop, they're an asset. Anything you have in inventory is an asset, which needs to be counted. Every dollar that you spend on the farm needs to go in some kind of bucket, and you need to be able to look at that, each one of those buckets, and say, this is what I'm spending it on.
Prepay is an asset.
Can I put an asterisk? Can I put an asterisk on the question and ask you again? I may have done an episode with Mr. Kevin and cutting the curve podcast, and we found out there were filters that were from a piece of equipment that he hadn't had for more than a decade. Is that's
inventory obsolescence?
So good. I'm glad you brought that up. Dad just told me Sunday. He said
it's an antique.
The teeth that they had from the excavators that they ran.
Yeah.
Local grading company come by, picked all of them up. They called him and said, "Look, it was like, just not even a half a 5-gallon bucket of teeth." He said, "It's $1,600 for those teeth." He said, "What would you?" Well, what do you want me to give you for them? Dad said, well, what are you happy with? And he said, $1,200, $1,300 sound good to you? And he said, oh, yeah, it sounds good. Wrote a check. I mean, that's $1,200 sitting on the shelf, collecting dust.
That didn't even work for you anymore.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't use them because they had sold their
equipment. This day and time, you got to be frugal.
The tips that we're giving the viewer is get rid of inventory.
Dad didn't put the check in my name, though. I just don't know.
You get a nice Christmas present.
Yeah, he kept that. He deserved it.
Know your cost of production. Keep an eye on inventory, or even get rid of dead inventory.
Yeah,
obsolete inventory.
If it ain't me, I had a landowner. I loved him to death. He was like a second grandpa to me, but he had so much of his old equipment sitting around, and people would try to buy it. No, I might need that one day. Well, now his children and grandchildren are having to clean all that stuff up, and it has no value to it except
scrap iron.
I mean, it's just scrap iron. Well, and it's sad.
Do you think one other mistake I see sometimes when it comes to finances, and it's hard to fight it, is, making sure you have enough working capital to get to the end of the year? Because, some guys, okay, let's say the lawnmower was on the balance sheet or whatever, but you wanted to go buy a new lawnmower. A lot of times, if it's just a smaller piece of equipment, like in my neck of the woods, maybe it's a track filler or something that seems insignificant, but when you buy an asset that's going to pay its way over the next several years and you pay cash for it, and then you're at the end of the year, you're going, well, wait, do I make that fungicide application? And you look at the bank account, well, you haven't really thought through your cash flow. And then do I leave myself working capital to make it through the year? Because you guys have said many times you've got to finish that crop out. Mm-hmm. And if you're sitting there going, no, that new tractor's paid for, there's no money against it, but then I can't afford to finish the crop out, well, then it isn't paid for,
right. That's exactly right.
And, cash is queen in today's environment. We was always taught cash was king, and, Dr. Cole, working with him, he said, no, it's queen now in this high interest rate environment, because the queen can move anywhere on the chessboard that she wants to move, where the king can only go one direction.
Yeah.
And I see it so much. And he was talking about borrowing money. That was, our capital, having capital cash flow there. That was one of the mistakes I done was back when we went through some times just like Matt, and it was terrible. But then when we finally borrowed money, we borrowed enough to get by, but we really didn't borrow enough to get our accounts payable like it needed to be. And then we still having to basically owner finance with some of those companies. And, that's been a regret of mine. If I could go back, I would have borrowed the extra cash then.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I could have got it. I don't know that, but I feel like I could.
Your work's
and then, well, well, the problem, Galynn, is that's how we started out, the three of us.
It is.
It was on our word. It was a handshake. Well, now it's you got to fit in this box. And if you don't fit in this box, and a lot of times these lenders, they don't have a personal relationship. They don't know you.
That's right.
They don't know how hard you work.
And they have to answer to a lot of examiners. Like there's things that didn't used to happen.
Exactly. And it really complicates things. That's what makes cash such a queen, is because it's got so much power.
But literal cash, $100 bills, this next generation don't even know what that is.
No, but I like
card or Apple Pay or
yeah.
I literally went in a restaurant and they was waiting to get in there, and it said the credit card machine was broke down, and I would watch people walk in. This is in Nashville. Walk in, see that sign, and
they
be
walk out.
I don't have any cash.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
but we're seeing a movement at home now that they're offering discounts if you pay with cash at restaurants. And I like that. Yeah. The fees has come up.
I got inventory management. I've got know your cost of production. I'm not sure I still got something to tell the viewers out here. What's your tips in navigating? You've been on both sides of it. You've been the ag lender. You've been a farmer. You've been a farmer that was pushed up against the ropes a couple of times, and you had to put your coat hangers on your balance sheet. What's your tips? What's your lessons? You got a lot of them.
Well, I mean, they pretty much covered that. Yeah. I mean, and the next thing is don't save yourself out of business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We get
that's right.
We're knee jerking because corn's $4. Yeah. And there's still nutrients out there and practices you've got to do, or you're going to make, instead of making 200 bushel, you're going to make 100 trying to save. Trying to save $200, you're going to cost yourself $400. And I did that last year, son.
You know, so there's those people that you can count them to always stick to the same messaging. And there's, I'm in no way being mean. Matt has stayed with that for, and we recorded a podcast, he says it, but a year ago he said, well, the thing is, it's not wrong. And it's just, by God, first, spend less than you earn. I mean, there's certain things you should know. Eat more exercise, eat less, exercise more. There's all kinds of things that are pretty simple, and it's not bad to keep going back to it. Like you just said, you can't keep cutting in your way to prosperity. Because at some point, you still got to have an investment and take some money to make some money.
Prime example is taking corn out of my rotation last year. Yeah. And we talked about that on the podcast. What cost me 200 pounds of cotton on the rotation and about 12 bushels of beans the following year. Or it will cost me that this year because I went beans on beans. Yeah. And it just, but I'm looking at, it's a negative on the corn. And but you can't look at just one crop. You got to look at your whole operation.
Right. Yeah. Global.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the same thing when you fertilize. If you cut back on that fertilize, and that crop's runs through stress, it don't have the food source there to get it through that stress, then the next thing you know, the money that you would have spent on fertilizer, you're having to do a rescue with fungicides or insecticides or whatever.
It still don't fix it.
Exactly. You'll never get back what you lose in a crop. And you might slow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it revenge, Galynn, or I don't know.
The thing is, and it's hard because you'll hear us talk a lot about a good fertilizer program is really probably as much art as it is science, because to your point and to Matt's point about if you don't spend enough, okay, let's say you're going for 240 bushel the acre corn and that phosphorus number is just hitting you across the face of it's too much. If you cut it back, then you might restrict yourself to 180. And if you go to what you should do, maybe you make the 240 and Mother Nature's kind to you and you push beyond that. But there's a point, if you pull it back, you don't give yourself that buffer. And if you can push up on that top side, sometimes that was your profit.
Well, you don't have the opportunity cost if you don't put the money in it. So that's just right. What you're saying. Yeah. If you might make 240, but right. If you put it there, you might not. But if you don't have it there, you're never going to.
I know.
No.
Yeah, that's
so you have no opportunity for the advancement.
Knowing that right level to be at where I'm at least over the hump of where I have the opportunity. But I think I'm also hearing a lot about at some point on these down economy, because this don't last a year. We're old enough to know that this doesn't go away next year.
Well, it's typically 7-year cycles is what they tell in business.
But it's looking better. The last month or so.
I'm actually, I'm more excited about this year for our area.
Yeah, I almost am too.
Because we know the bottoms anyway.
Look, if Matt's excited, then I think everyone should be excited. We're good.
I'm maybe not excited, but I'm not just sick at my stomach. Because I think that there's an opportunity here to, once you've been through those lean years, but what you can't do, I say this all the time, you can't knee jerk. We're looking at a 10-year plan or a 5-year plan. Just because corn drops out 1 year, you can't just change your whole frame of mind to try to fix it in it. We don't fix our plants at the end of the year. We fix them as we go. And if you don't watch it, you'll be so short-minded that you won't. Your plans. If you're here today at farming, if you get a crop loan this year, you're pretty doggone successful.
Yeah, because of the
you've done something right.
The folks that are really upside down are probably not going to get renewed. By the way, Temple and Chad get mad at Matt when he always says failures and success. I was going to go when you start talking about him if he's optimistic, I was say pessimist. And since I'm looking my way, hothead.
Yeah.
Pessimist, hothead. You know what you also said, one of you, that about navigating this, since that's the idea of this episode, was to say how you navigate it. I think it's almost being realistic or having some acceptance of ag's a cyclical business. And you're going to have these things. And if you truly are just a mess, maybe this game ain't for you. Because I've
asked myself that same question.
Well, I'm not being mean.
I had a guy tell me, an old timer, he said, in a 10-year period, you'll have 2 great years, 2 terrible years, and then you'll have 6 that are average.
Survival years.
And you may have been the one that told me that. I don't remember, but
Wait, did you start it? Yeah, you started with old guys.
Old timer, so I don't think it was you. But if you build your war chest on the 2 bad, the 2 good years, then you can afford the 2 bad years, and then the other ones are
keep those other 6 are base hits.
And we can say what we want to. Farmers live well, they do well, and it don't matter what corn is. Your lifestyle is going to be the same until you go broke, till you have an option.
I remember reading something somewhere and we're fortunate that we get to do this in farming and in the great United States, is that freedom is about getting to choose your pain as much as it is, being able to experience the other side of it. But everywhere you go in life's going to be a little pain. We're kind of living through that right now as far as that sharp pencil in agriculture, but at least it's our choice and we can look at it and decide how to navigate through it.
And if you know your cost of production and know your inventory, then it's easier to navigate that. If you can't navigate something without correct data.
Yeah.
There's been times when I've made decisions, $1 million decisions on incorrect data. That just don't work. It's just rolling the dice.
And it goes to your thing about you can't save your way into prosperity. If you don't really know your cost of production, you're starting to make decisions about the investment without knowing what the investment's even returning.
Exactly.
And let me look at your whole portfolio and saying, we're going to sell these stocks. Well, why? Because they're the first 3 I threw a dart at. I mean, that'd just be, and that's about what you're talking about on these spending decisions.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kevin?
Well, I think the one thing that I've learned over the years is, you want to try to just talk, let's buy this piece of equipment so we don't have to pay taxes. We need some depreciation. And I'm at the age now, I like to pay taxes. I want to be in a position that my accountants has done all they can do, and then I got to pay taxes. And that is a really good year to have.
You never leave yourself a pathway out if you don't pay taxes, because if you're always paying it forward to avoid that, if you ever decide, you know what, I'm done.
So I hope I get to pay them this year. Last year I didn't need any deduction. Good Lord took care of it.
There have been a lot of instances of farm equipment purchases at the end of December that were, in hindsight, pretty stupid.
Well, the problem is if you got the cash on hand to do it, but when you acquire a debt, and then you got a payment, and then you have a lean year during that payment term, and then you can't
creating debt for something you don't need to avoid taxes is a pretty poor decision.
Kind of like my wife on her dress was on sale. I said, "Well, you got 4?" Yeah, but it was on sale.
And so that's one of the things we ain't going there. That's one of the things we're not going to recommend. We're not recommending that you buy a bunch of stuff.
Don't get involved with what the wife wants.
All right, we're going to leave it. We're going to leave it there. I think how to navigate. I love the story that when you're putting your lawnmower on the balance sheet, you know that things are getting up against the wall. I had some bad times about 20 years ago. I went to the bank and I needed some money, and the banker lady says, "You got a P&L, your profit and loss statement, a balance sheet?" And I said, "Sure." And she says, "Well, I'll just use the one from last year. Your number's pretty much the same." And this is where, honestly, I just said, Cindy, I I made all those numbers up then too, so I really don't know.
Yeah, show me what lie I told you last year, and then I'll tell you a different one this year.
We're talking about having to be in an agricultural downturn, and we know that the ag economy is a little bit tough, but you know what? You've always got friends, and they're right here at the Granary. So you can pull up a chair, pour yourself a drink. You got friends you can talk to, and figuratively, we want you to be with us. We do a lot of these episodes. This one was sponsored by our friends at AgroLiquid. Galynn Beer is not only a farmer in Oklahoma, he's also an employee with AgroLiquid, and he's a darn knowledgeable one. So anyway, we really appreciate you being a sponsor here. If you want to learn more about AgroLiquid's lineup of fertility products, you can go to
agroliquid.com.
Until next time, thanks for being here with Kevin, Matt, and Galynn, and me. Thanks so much. And from the Granary, cheers.